Hello, welcome. My name is Jason Weber with Christian Alliance for Orphans. All this month, Jason Johnson is doing an Ask the Author series and is interviewing authors in this space. But we wanted to turn the tables on him today, and we wanted to interview him. So, hey, Jason, how's it going?
Hey, it's going well. Thanks for doing this. I tried to interview myself in the mirror and it just got super awkward. So I
Yeah,
appreciate you coming to help out.
yeah, absolutely. Happy to do it. Well, for those of you watching, Jason is a writer and speaker who encourages families and equips churches in their foster care and adoption journeys. He serves as the director of church ministry initiatives with the Christian Alliance for Orphans. Jason and his wife Emily live in Texas with their daughters. He has authored 3 books: Reframing Foster Care, Everyone Can Do Something, and All in Orphan Care. And he blogs regularly at jasonjohnsonblog.com. And today we're going to be focusing in on mostly on one particular book that you've written, Reframing Foster Care, which is just a fantastic resource for families. I want to start by before we get into the stuff on the book, can you talk a little bit about how you uh, got into this space to begin with?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'll do my best to give the short answer. Like many that might be listening or watching, my wife and I had a 1 day conversation going on. Maybe one day we'll do this. Maybe one day we'll adopt, or one day we'll foster. And that elusive one day of, well, how do you know when the one day has arrived? Well, when our kids are the right age, or life has slowed down enough, and all of these things that never seem to actually you, happen, right? Life has never slowed down enough. And so we hit this day where we realized, and it was primarily, to be honest with you, through her leading, through my wife really encouraging me to consider this and pray through this, and her coming one day and saying, you know what, there's never going to be a perfect time for us to do this. There's kids out there now, and it's just time for us to do it. Um, and that's when I realized the one day is now. And so I was pastoring our young church at the time. A lot of people in our church were getting involved in foster care, and I'll tell you that helped as well. Just being around a community of people where we could look around and see, you know what, they're doing it, and if we do it, we know we won't be alone. And so in 2012, my wife and I became foster parents in the city of Houston.
That's so good. As we let's dive into reframing foster care in particular. And, what I wanted to ask you first is, what is it about the foster care experience that you felt like needed to be reframed?
Yeah, so much. And maybe no one else can relate to this, but at least for me, I just felt like so much of my thinking and my perspective was really being confronted and challenged on a number of things, on theologically what I believe about God and how God works, even parenting and marriage and just life in general. And if anyone has stepped into foster care, you'll understand when I say your world is really flipped upside down, and it's like you live in a new world. The curtain is kind of peeled back for you, and you're sucked into this entirely new world full of new perspectives and a new posture. And for me, it was very much this idea that the goal of my life was to be comfortable and to be convenient, and to isolate and insulate from anything that's hard or anything that's broken or anything that's uncomfortable. And I think we all kind of maybe subconsciously live under that narrative or that pressure, even sometimes, like the pressure to make sure everything is good all the time and easy and comfortable. And then when you step into foster care, you quickly understand, not only is that not the goal of life, but it's an unrealistic expectation of life. We live in a very broken and difficult world, and we serve a God who moves towards our broken and our hard. And it's, if I can just kind of poke and prod a little bit, for me and maybe for others, I discovered I was really, really good at raising my hands in worship to a God who moved towards my hard and broken. And I was also really, really good at using those same hands to kind of push the hard and broken of other people away.
Mhm.
And that's where my entire thinking and theology and way of living really had to be reframed.
Yeah. Yeah, our culture has generally conditioned us to insulate ourselves from hard things, move towards comfort, whether it's, where we choose to live, who we hang out with, where we worship. I think almost everyone entering foster care knows that it's going to be hard. I think
Yeah.
almost no one entering foster care understands just how hard
Right.
it's going to
Right.
be.
Yeah.
So you touched on this a little bit, but what does the life of Jesus, and maybe more importantly, the death of Jesus on the cross, teach us about moving toward the hard?
Yeah, so there's this doctrine called incarnation. It's the idea that God stepped out of His glory, wrapped Himself in humanity, and lived among us. We celebrate this at Christmas, and I encourage pastors all the time. Anytime I'm in the room with them, and we're talking about this, look, next Christmas, let your Christmas series be all about God's heart for the vulnerable and inviting people to respond to that. Because that's Christmas. It's the idea that God stepped out of His glory into our humanity, wrapped Himself up in our brokenness, and not only wrapped Himself up in our brokenness, but carried our brokenness to the cross and was broken by our brokenness so that we don't have to be broken anymore. Now, we still live with the residue of brokenness in this world, but our hope and our confident hope is that one day all that residue will be gone. Everything that's wrong will be made right. Everything will be renewed. And similarly, um, I find that again, we want to raise our hands in worship to that, and we also want to extend our hands in demonstration of that. And so, moving towards hard and broken is not, um, well, I'm just going to fix everything. I want to fix everything, and immediately, fast, right? I was even having a conversation with someone the other day about the fact that, Jesus' solution to our brokenness could have easily been snap my fingers, all fixed, right? Instead, he said, my solution is I'm going to enter into it and I'm going to live among it and I'm going to let it break me. And I think maybe similarly for us, sometimes our expectation is I'm going to move towards hard things and I'm going to do my best to fix them as quickly as possible. And maybe God's invitation to us is how about you move towards hard things, live among them, be wrapped up in them and be broken by them. And then from there we'll start to see renewal
Yeah.
happen. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that one of the very earliest temptations of foster parenting and constant temptations of foster parenting is what you just said, the propensity to get in there, fix brokenness, and as you point out here and in the book, fixing brokenness is not necessarily the outcome of entering into brokenness. That's not necessarily the end result. You don't necessarily get to fix it all. What effect
Right.
has bringing brokenness into your home had on you and your family?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll go back to something you said earlier that we all know it's going to be hard. We just don't expect it to be that hard, right? And like at some points on our journey, if we're honest, we say, "Hey, God, I know this is what I signed up for, but right now, this is not at all what I signed up for. Like this is above and beyond. I didn't ask for this." Um, and you and I have had this conversation before, but I find that actually to be an extreme display of His mercy towards us.
Mhm.
That we don't know everything immediately. If you think about it, it's the mercy of God that He doesn't necessarily withhold information from us, but He protects us from knowing too much too soon. That's what any good parent does. We don't want our 2-year-olds to know how to open medicine bottles. We don't want our 9-year-old boys to know how to like drive the car. Not because we want to deprive them of that, but because we want to protect them of the consequences of not being able to handle that yet. Um, and I think God in His mercy says, hey, look, here's what I want you to do. And I'm not going to tell you everything that's going to unfold right now. Um, we're on a need to know basis, and I'll let you know what you need to know when you need to know it, when I know that you can handle it, right? When you're prepared for it. So I say often, if God had told us all the hard that would have unfolded the moment we first said yes, I think we would have been just destroyed by that. And I probably would have said, never mind. The answer is no now. Like, if that's what it's going to be. But on a flip side, if God had told us all the good that would unfold and all the beautiful things, I don't know that I would have believed him. I would have said, you're selling me a bill of goods. There's no way that good things like that are going to happen if we say yes. We can't do that, right? And so it's his mercy that he withholds that. And then the brokenness hits and the hard things hit. And I'll tell you, to answer your question, it's opened our family's world up. It's opened my kids' world and perspective up. They see the world differently. They understand that the world works differently than maybe they would have understood otherwise. They they have a new perspective, a new way of seeing the world. They've seen mom and dad weep over brokenness. They themselves have cried over it. And so it's deeply and profoundly changed us as a family. And I say this, and I don't mean this lightly, because it's been hard in a number of ways. But I think opening our home to the journey of foster care has given our family and given our kids a gift that we as mom and dad would have never been able to give them on our own. And it's been a hard gift at times and a heavy gift at times, but it's one that I think they'll continue to carry with them. And I don't know what God will do with it as they grow older, but I know that it's in there. And it wasn't before, and now it is. And so it'll be interesting to see what comes of it.
Yeah, I want to dive into that a little bit more as it relates to your kids. You know, there's a quote in the book, in I believe chapter 11, and you say this: "There's a fine line between protecting our kids from the dangers of being exposed to hard things, and protecting them from the hazards inherent in not having been exposed to them." You know,
Yeah.
we in our family, we've experienced the reality of that quote in our own family. We've watched our girls cry when we unpack the Christmas ornament at Christmas time of a child who once was in our home and is no longer in our home. And you know, when we talk about protecting ourselves from hard things, that temptation is even greater when it comes to the kids already in our home. We want to protect them from hard things. That's our instinct as parents. Talk about that line between those two things.
Yeah, now you're using my words against me here. But it's good. It's gosh, the fine line that, and if we're honest as parents, you know, I get one of the questions is, well, where is that line? Like, where do we draw that line? And I would say the line moves all the time. It's constantly moving. And part of our job as parents is to just kind of try to keep up with where that line is. The line between, we want our, here's how it played out for us, Emily and I. We said, we want our girls to feel the weight of this, but we don't want them to resent this. And where's that fine line between the two? Constantly moving, you know, and I think similarly on a grander scale, we want our kids to feel the weight of some hard things around them and some needs around them. And how does that play itself out? Well, we've seen it play itself out where they've been able to recognize some things in other kids at school just on their own intuitively, because I think of experiences that they've had at home that maybe they otherwise wouldn't have been able to recognize, right? So for example, our youngest right now, there's a little boy in her class who gives everybody a hard time. And we've even heard parents communicate that, you know, hey, he wasn't like this a couple years ago, and something switched, a switch has flipped. And what we know is that there's been a divorce, there's been a move, there's been a blending of families, there's been some really hard things in this kid's life the last couple of years. And our 8, almost 9-year-old is very in tune with that. Actually, she has a lot of empathy for him and a lot of she'll even say, you know, hey, he was being annoying today, but ... you know, but you know, he couldn't go to his dad's house last weekend, and it really has bothered him this week, right? So I mean, just little things like that where you go, okay, there's an intuitiveness that's forming, there's an empathy that's forming, and this is the fruit of allowing our kids to see and feel and hear some hard things in a helpful way for them. and then identifying where's that fine line. So on the flip side, we've had to say no to some things because we knew that it just wouldn't be best for that child or for our family. We've had to say right now is a time for us to take a pause in a season of rest because we feel like we've lost sight maybe of where that line is. It's moved out of our peripheral vision, and we just need to pause and rest and make sure our kids are healthy, our family's healthy. But I'll tell you this, Jason, and I've heard this from a number of other families. We were really concerned about the effect it would have on our kids before we went into this. And then after we've started, there were multiple occasions when mom and dad were like, all right, we're done. We need a rest, or we're done. Like we're throwing in the towel. And it was our kids who were like, no, why? Like, why would we stop? I remember a season where we said, I think we're just going to start doing respite for now or do some babysitting for now. And our kids said, why would we do that? And we thought like they were thinking, no, we don't want to do that. Why would we do that? And then we discovered they were actually saying, why would we only do that? Let's keep fostering. And we're like, oh gosh, don't do that to us, right? So I just want to encourage families that having those conversations with your kids, always being in tune with where they are, helps you kind of get a grid of where is that line and where is it moved. But we've seen some intuitiveness, some empathy, and even them pushing us as mom and dad when we really didn't feel like being pushed.
Mm-hmm. Let's move from kids to marriage. Yeah. So talk about the toll foster parenting takes on a marriage. What are some practical things we can do about it?
Man, you're hitting them hard. When I was pastoring, the two worst sermon series to have to preach were on parenting and marriage, because it's like, hey, everybody, I have no idea what I'm doing for the most part in these two spaces. Let's preach sermons on them and act like I do, So, all right, let's jump to marriage. It gave my wife and I a shared ministry, something that we do together. And I think that's important for a lot of marriages. Maybe you have two different jobs, or one of you works and the other doesn't. You're just like, it's very easy. And this, especially the older and busier our kids get, for our lives to start heading into different directions. And then hopefully at some point during the day, we intersect and we're like, oh, hey, good to see you. So it offered that to us. And I say this often, it allowed me to see a side of my wife that I don't know I would have ever seen, frankly. Foster care, this journey kind of drew that out of her. And similarly, for her to see a side of me. I saw her love with extreme empathy struggling biological moms in a way that I think only she could, because she could relate as a mom. And that's not something I don't know that I would have seen to that extent had we not opened our home to this. And she saw me, who's relatively cerebral and linear and non-emotional. And these are just things that I've heard from other people often. Get deeply connected to these little girls that we would foster and love them as my own, and weep when they leave and fight hard for them. And it's shown us a side of each other and a side of our marriage that I don't think that we would have been able to see otherwise. So that's been a gift. It's also added to the complexity of ensuring that we set our marriage as primary, right? And it's easy as husband and wife to, anytime you're connecting or having conversation, you only talk about your kids, or you talk about kind of functional language. What do we need to do? Who do we need to pick up? How is this going to work? All that kind of stuff. And then you compound that with foster care. And there was a season where we found all that we're ever really talking about with each other is foster care. And we need to stop that. The glue that holds our marriage together is not what we do together in foster care, but it's who we are together in Jesus. And we really had to take a step back and say, our relationship is primary. And when we're healthy, our family's healthy, our kids are healthy, and our home is healthy, so that we can help other kids, and when our marriage is not healthy, everyone loses down the line from there.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. So when we talk about parenting kids who've been in hard places, there's a lot of great content and training out there on trauma, um, and parenting kids from those hard places. I don't know about you. Sometimes when I go to a conference on parenting from trauma, I am an excellent parent for 2.5 days after that, and then it all falls apart. So, what would you say to the parent who's tried all the techniques and strategies and it's still not quote unquote working?
Yeah, that's good. Um, I don't know if it was Mike Tyson, but I like to pretend it was him who said, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face, right? And then your plan's out the window and now you're scrambling. And for some of us, that literally has been the case. I have a plan on how I'm going to address this behavioral issue in my kid. And then I literally got punched in the face. I have. I even have a little mark right here on my forehead as evidence of some recent interactions. We've had holes in the wall. We've had you walk in the room and everything's been ripped up and destroyed. And so the first thing I say is, you're not alone. You're not alone. And um, to a certain degree, it's normal. And I say it's normal in the sense of, you're not particularly doing something wrong. Um, this is a struggle that many people have, and you're not alone in it. Um, and as best as I can tell, the experts say, in order to regulate and diffuse situations that you're in, where I had a plan, I've gotten punched in the face, everything's thrown out the window, now what do I do? The most important thing, and we have to remind ourselves of this, Emily and I do often, in order to diffuse and regulate and calm the situation, we ourselves need to be diffused and regulated and calm. And that might mean just stepping away for a little while. And we have found that when we take a little bit of space to do that for us, it creates a lot of space for our kiddos to do that for themselves. And then when we're able to come back and circle back around, um, it's better. It creates a better environment. Um, but I know there's some really hard things, and people are encountering and dealing with some really hard things. Some of those things where you say, I know I signed up for this, but this isn't what I signed up for, God. And I don't know if I can handle this anymore. And I don't know how much longer I can handle it. And I would say you're not alone. You need to be reminded of that. And as best as you can, to connect, surround yourself with people who have that shared experience and who can encourage you in that. Because it can feel really lonely and isolating when it's just you in your kid's bedroom trying to get them to stop ripping the house apart. And you need to be in a space where other people can say, hey, we get it. We understand. You're not alone. And we want to help you with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna shift gears here and go from talking about foster care to talking about writing about foster care.
All right.
So I think a lot of our audience may be in the space because I know this is true for you as well. We run into a lot of people who are in the foster care space, the adoption space, who have a desire to tell their story, whether that's verbally in front of others, interpersonally, or in writing through blogs or books or whatever. And I think our audience would be interested. I'm personally interested just to know what you've learned over time about the craft of telling your story as it relates to foster care.
That's good. That's good. I think so. The biggest compliment that I can get from, as a writer, from anyone who reads any words or listens to any words that have been spoken, is this: you've put words to things that I've been trying to think for a long time. I just haven't been able to put words to it. And so that kind of acts as a grid and a motivation for me, that I want to ensure that the words I'm using and the way that I'm using them, people can really connect to. That they're not just kind of lofty out here, but it's deep and cuts to the heart of actually where people are in real and raw ways, and to be honest with them, but to be hopeful with them. So the balance between honest and hopeful and this may sound strange. I'll say this. a few years ago, I was sitting in a Christmas Eve sermon, and the theme of the sermon was Blue Christmas. And the whole idea was Christmas is hard for a lot of people. Christmas can be depressing. The holidays can really, mess with your emotions. And I know that, Christmas is hard for you. And I'm sitting there thinking, actually, it's not hard for me, and I don't appreciate you telling me that it is, right? Like, what, don't tell me to feel a certain way in order to create a platform to say what you want to say. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think the subtle craft of, don't try to manipulate people's emotions or massage certain things into people that may or may not be true. Let's just be honest and raw and speak words where they go, "Oh, I have felt that. I have thought that for so long. I've just not been able to put those kinds of words to it. And it's so good to have the words now for me to be able to use, if that makes sense."
So if I'm, that's really insightful. I think as I hear that, and you are very good at doing that. It's kind of a superpower for you. And but I think that's what a lot of us listening are thinking. Well, yeah, but that's Jason Johnson's superpower, is being able to do that. Are there things that you have done over time to develop that, to get better at that, to figure out what that where that space lies?
Yeah, that's good. Um, I'm a dork, kind of like you, Weber, and let's just be honest. Like, we read nerdy books and we listen to stuff on. I'm fascinated by communication techniques, and I'm fascinated by marketing campaigns and the people who put those marketing campaigns together. Like, I'm fascinated by companies that spend millions of dollars a year on crafting how they're going to communicate in a very quick and succinct and compelling way to their audience. And I think we have a lot to learn from them. And I don't mean it to be crass, like, we should all go get, our masters in business or anything, but I do think we have a lot to learn from people who've spent many, many years learning how to communicate, and how to communicate things in a short, memorable, compelling way that sticks with people. And that's what we're talking about, is you've given me words to things that I felt or experienced, and I now have those words that I carry with me forever now. Um, uh, my 8-year-old was on a basketball team. It wrapped up a few months ago, and the name of their team was Liberty. And all of the little girls on the team developed a cheer for their team. And it was basically the Liberty Mutual commercial, right? They were like, Liberty, 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 Liberty. And that was it, like the worst cheer ever. But these are 8-year-old girls who are reciting a marketing campaign for an insurance company, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's because when we can give people, again, memorable, repeatable, succinct words that they can relate to and make their own, then they can carry them with them and use them. So that's why we say things like, we're not all called to do the same thing, but everyone can do something. Like, memorable, quick, succinct. So I would focus on that. I would take the big ideas and the big stories that you want to communicate, and then boil it down to, what is that one memorable, succinct phrase that I would want people repeating and carrying with them long after they read what I have to write.
Yeah, that's really good. I think one of the temptations early on when you start thinking about and starting to tell your story is, well, I'm just going to recount. You treat it as a history. Like, I'm going to recount the history of what we've experienced. But what we notice in your writing is you're very deliberate about the words you use to describe those experiences, and deliberate about what you include and what you leave out. Like, it is a process of being very deliberate.
It is. And to that point of what you include and what you leave out, right? We all are very conscious in the foster care and adoption space of honoring the stories of our children, that they are their stories to be told. And I'm fully on board with that, and I fully resonate that. And yet I also hold that in balance with, there is a story that God is writing that he says, I want you to tell it. I have a story of redemption and a story of renewal and a story of the gospel that I want you to communicate. And so everything that I write or communicate about any of the kids that we've experienced, our youngest is adopted through foster care. We're deeply engaged with a young mom and her kiddos, and we've shared some of their story. But kind of the litmus test that I run it all through is years from now, when my little girl turns around and reads what dad wrote a long time ago, does it make her smile? Does she go, oh gosh, this is so good? I want to tell the stories of these kids coupled with the story of Jesus in such a way that years from now they're able to look back and I'm able to say, your story, whether you knew it or not, was impacting the lives of so many people, and you had no idea, in an honoring way. So that's a great litmus test. And I'll be honest, sometimes I run across writing and maybe it's crossed the line a little bit, and I think, I don't know that your kids would really appreciate you sharing these things, right? So can you write in such a way and share your story in such a way that is honoring in the moment, but also honoring in the future when they look back on some of the things that you shared?
This has been so rich, Jason. Thank you so much for opening up and being transparent and talking through these things. For those of you out there, you can find Jason's stuff wherever you get books, Amazon. Today we've been talking about reframing foster care. You can also find his writing at jasonjohnsonblog.com. So again, thanks, Jason. It's been great talking to you.
Cool. Thanks so much.